Welcome to the nature of truth. This is a simple course that I've put together to help anyone who is in a position where they're looking for a really, really simple answer to questions that might seem complicated. The way I see the world is this: to understand the nature of truth is to understand the nature of you. My name is Amy Brooke. I am a mother of 8 children. I really value being a stay-at-home mom, so I run my practice from my home. From the beginning, I've been a pioneer and a blazer of trails. I have a tendency to do things my way and to figure out things from my own perspective, and it's been a huge blessing for me in my life. Part of that is because I was born with very little sight. And while it is correctable, my sight wasn't corrected until I was a little bit older. I was almost in kindergarten. And it put me on a really different path. I think neurologically, it made a lot of difference in my life. It's been a huge part of who I've become and a huge part of what I've had to overcome in my life. I have an insatiable desire to understand the nature of God and to understand life itself. So that understanding adds up to me understanding my own nature. It's been a huge, huge thing for me to understand the rhythms and the patterns of the universe, of the way God works, in order to find my own flow and my own expansion, which pretty much comes down to getting into my purpose of life. I love the simplest things in life. And yet I never stop dreaming big or having fabulous adventures. I am a certified clinical hypnotherapist. I am also a master practitioner of neurolinguistic programming and also timeline therapy. In the past, I still am a licensed massage therapist. In the past, I worked as a massage therapist. I've been a birth assistant and a doula. So I love all things people and all things body and all things psychology. I love learning about people and what makes us do what we do. I have a special love and understanding of nature and feel very at home in nature and with nature. And of course, interestingly, I have eyes that see deeper into simple things and I see them in unique ways. And I think that's because of my incapacity to be able to see with my physical eyes for a very long time. Why you are here. What a really, really, really fun thing to dive into. Why are you here? In my opinion, from my perspective, you're here because you have questions without answers. You're here because you have problems without solutions, and you want those answers and you want those solutions. You've already tried to figure out what to do by thinking through the problem, by thinking through the question. And maybe even you've gotten to the point of taking action. And yet your thoughts haven't helped you figure it out because your thoughts loop and they jumble. And your answers, when put into action, don't get you very far, very fast. And because of that, the solutions and answers you may have found so far feel unobtainable. And you might be to the point where you feel like forgetting about it or letting go of hope. But you know there are answers somewhere. And somehow there is some kind of resolution in all of that. And you're searching for those answers everywhere. So that's why you're here. But I think, and this is my intent, that this is what will happen because you're here. My first intention is you will come into a clearer understanding of your power to transcend your problems or questions by updating and aligning your mind. Another intention that I have is you will come to a deeper understanding of who you are and to a grander vision of your potential. You will come to a deeper understanding of truth consciously, and that you will experience radical shifts as your unconscious beliefs align to match those truths. You will come to understand your unconscious mind's purpose, role, and attributes so that you can begin to understand yourself and your power. And you will come to an understanding that hypnosis isn't possibly what you think it is. From my perspective, all of life is hypnosis. The first thing we're going to talk about is to merely touch on what I see as the dynamics of truth, or the physics of truth, how truth works as a moving, living thing. Okay, so the first thing about truth is that truth expands and untruth shrinks. Okay, this dynamic shows up. I want you to consider someone who is super good at getting out onto the stage and speaking. Okay, let's say we have a mother and she leaves her home and she's going to a speaking engagement. She's going to be speaking about motherhood. Okay, and she notices a note in her car. And when she gets to where she's going, she pulls into the building, leans over, parks, right, leans over, looks at the piece of paper, and she opens it up. And what if that paper said, "Mom, I'm really questioning the way you're parenting me," da 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 da, and it goes on, right? Now, let's just hypothetically say that this wasn't even real. Okay, that wherever this note came from was just a test for this mom, okay, to see what would happen when untruth settled inside of her. Okay, let's say that they have a fabulous relationship. How is that mom going to show up on that stage 15 minutes from this moment when she's just been enveloped in this untruth? Okay, now, again, we're not going to decide whether or not this is true or not true, but let's say for the purpose of this discussion that this is actually untrue. Okay, someone's playing an awful trick on this mom, and there's this note, supposedly from her daughter, filling her with all of these doubts about who she is as a person and who she is as a mom. When she walks onto that stage, she is not going to show up with the same amount of confidence. She isn't. Those truths, if she absorbs them, right? If she embodies them, if she believes them, if she allows them past her critical factor, then it's going to shrink her. Okay, we see this all the time. From victimhood to victor is the difference between moving from untruth to truth. From poverty to abundance is the process of moving from untruth to truth. From confidence, like this mom, when untruth settles in, shrinks her down into a person who lacks the confidence that she had before. Okay, the dynamics of truth number 2. Truth magnetizes more truth, and untruth magnetizes more untruth. This is a simple universal law. Intelligence attracts intelligence. This happens with people all the time, right? Light cleaves to light. Wisdom creates more wisdom. Darkness attracts more darkness. Now, a simple way of seeing this functioning within the real world would be something like a story that I once heard, and I'm probably from the Reader's Digest, from if it was from my mom or something from my childhood, but a story of a lady who lives in a super cluttery home. And one day she hears a knock on her door, and she answers the door, and someone has gifted her with a lovely, lovely, massive bouquet of flowers. Well, she doesn't even have a place, a flat surface that's open and available for these flowers to lay. So she stands in her dining room and she's looking around for where to put these flowers. She has no place to put these flowers. And something sparks something in her. The beauty of these flowers and the beauty of the moment that she's experiencing, where she's received this really beautiful gift, it means something. Okay, this is the truth. And she creates a space by clearing off the kitchen table. Okay, and then she sees the kitchen table up against the rest of the dining room and goes to work cleaning up the rest of the dining room, because this space needs to be held for this thing of beauty. Okay. That's, of course, within the story, she eventually ends up cleaning the entire kitchen, the whole house eventually, right? Why? Because of this simple idea. The opposite is also true. Every mother knows that a really clean room, the first time someone sets something down in that room, it attracts more stuff almost instantly. Okay. Whatever we embody inside of ourselves, we attract more of it to ourselves. We're going to talk a little bit more about that later. The dynamics of truth, number 3. Truth is eternal and untruth will die away. We don't have to fight things that are untrue. We don't have to heal from things that are untrue. We just get to let them go away because they have zero power. What has power is truth. When we're not in power, it's because we've given any power that we have to untruth, but it doesn't have any truth in and of itself, or power in and of itself, excuse me. The dynamics of truth, number 4, all truths are separated for our learning purposes. We must always learn the two sides as separate pieces before we understand the truth as a whole. I think the simplest way to describe this kind of dynamic is the idea of justice and mercy. Okay, justice and mercy are opposites. And we may naturally have a tendency toward mercy. And mercy is the right thing. And we come to, value mercy and believe in mercy. And then at one point in our lives, we're also going to have to learn justice. And when we learn justice, it's completely the opposite of mercy. And yet we see the wisdom in that. We value that. And now we have this place where we're valuing these two very, very different things, right? But once we are able to embody the truth of both, we start to recognize that these are two pieces of the same coin, almost like when children are learning how to read and they separate words out, like little bits of words out, right? We separate them out into syllables, or we separate them out into phonetically, we separate them out, right? But the intent was to learn the whole word, not to learn the parts. And this is where humans get stuck sometimes, is we go to one side and choose into that one side and throw mud at everybody on the other side, right? But really, it's all about the whole word. It's about the truth as a whole. Because when we come to understand mercy and justice and we put them together, then we start to understand that the most merciful thing we can do is to hold someone accountable. That's where wisdom is derived, being able to take these parts, these two parts, and bring them together into this middle way. Okay. Those were the dynamics of truth. Now we're going to talk just for a little bit about the dynamics of growth. Okay. Our birth holds certain patterns. Every mom who's gone through birth understands these patterns. Okay. So our rebirth, and that's what we're all doing throughout our lives, is we're being reborn. Not physically anymore. We're being reborn into the other phases or the other planes of existence. So our rebirth carries dynamics like up and down. Okay. And all of these exist in nature as well. Okay. So there's the up and down, like the crests and the troughs of a wave. Everyone's experienced this one before. There are days that are up and there are days that are harder, right? There are moments when we're feeling it, like we're going through this really hard spell and there's lots of down, and then we get an up and then there's a down again. Like that's a normal, everyone knows this phenomenon. There's in and out Okay. So there are phases in life or experiences in life that put us in a position where there's more pressure. Like I'm in this pressured spot. And then the pressure goes off and everything feels okay for a while. And then the pressure comes back again. Okay. Look at the contractions of delivering a baby. It's pressure and then rest, and then pressure and then rest. This exists in nature everywhere. Circling is also a pattern within the growth process. And the circling isn't on one plane, actually. It's more spiraling. Okay. I mean, there's so much into our DNA, right? There's so much there. But we're going to keep it simple for today. Circling, whenever there are opportunities that circle around, and if we don't learn them first time, they'll circle around again, and they'll continue to circle around, which people will say, I'm stuck in my patterns, but it's really the most merciful process. Can we see mercy in that? You're not stuck. You're here in this space. I'm actually stuck in one right now. I'm still trying to figure it out. Okay, so there's this circling thing that's happening, and it's so merciful that we get to keep playing the game until we figure out that piece. And a lot of times we think it's a piece of information, and most of the time it's neurological. It's something unconscious instead of something conscious. The next one is death and rebirth. The simplest and easiest way to describe this one is, if you look at a seed is a thing, it's an entity. A seed has an identity, okay? But the seed has to die for the tree or the plant to be born. That process is happening in nature. That process is happening in us. I mean, look at the butterfly, look at the dragonfly. There's so much of this metamorphosizing going on. Who we think we are, people call that ego, right? Who we think we are, we try to protect as if that's the thing of value. But once it breaks open and this new creature starts to come out and be born, then we start to recognize and realize that that outer piece meant nothing. I mean, ask an oak tree that's 50 years old where the shell that once housed it is. It's not even in its, it doesn't matter anymore, right? Yeah. So this one we talked about, the last one we talked about just a little bit when we talked about the back and forth and the two sides, the back and forth pendulum searching for balance. Okay. We do this a lot. I have a whole other hour we could talk about just this pendulum swing, but we're not going to. Okay. So when we embody a truth, it is the process of coming into enlightenment, coming into perfection, coming into alignment, coming into at-one-ment. Okay. To embody, what it means to embody a truth. I can read something and I can know it here. But to embody it is to accept a belief on both the conscious and unconscious levels. It becomes a part of who we are. Course from the New Testament, you shall know the truth and the truth shall make you free. And I'm going to explain how. Carl Jung, one of my favorite humans that's ever lived, when you are not quite at one with yourself, you are approaching a neurotic condition. Neurosis comes from being not at one. From my perspective, our issues, whether they be physical, mental, emotional, or spiritual, come from undefined, underdefined, misdefined identity within ourselves. And there are a couple of other things, but they all go back to this. We're going to talk about those other things in just a little bit, but they all come back to identity, 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 identity. That's where all of our issues lie. Okay, I'm going to show you in some pictures and with some explanation how that looks to me. Okay, so this is what our disconnected thinking looks like. One thing that I hear over and over and over from people is my brain won't shut off. My thinking loops. I don't ever get to solid answers. I'm more confused than I've ever been before. And because of that, I lack focus. I am inconsistent in how I show up in the world. And I don't know what I'm doing. I'm maintaining. I'm just existing. Okay. This looks like thought looping, feeling stuck, feeling a lack of momentum, self-doubt, struggling with inner chaos and also outer chaos, feelings of unworthiness, living with shame, living with unfulfilled expectations for ourselves, for the world, for all the things, okay? Questioning everything, living with guilt, and having a lack of boundaries. Lack of boundaries super ties into identity. And they may be experiencing other issues like addictions, physical body dis-ease, relationship issues, financial issues, mental health problems, spiritual stagnancy, all the things, okay? When we define our identity according to truth, okay, and believe me, I get this. We live in a world where truth has lots of question marks around it. In fact, I remember, and this was 20 years ago, I remember when I was in my class going to massage therapy school, and we were all, I don't know, I think we were studying like Chinese philosophy or something, and we were all standing in a circle, and the teacher asked if you believe in a universal truth, if you believe that universal truth exists, or if truth is relative, right? That's the opposite. Take a step forward into the center of the circle. And maybe there were 30 students-ish. I was the only one who stepped into the middle. Like, I get this. I get that what I'm teaching here is to the world radical. Maybe to you it is, I don't know. But to me, it's not, because there are, in my opinion, universal truths that do matter. And our identity is so tied into those that when we lose those truths, we become lost to ourselves in a way. So when we define our identity according to truth, everything shifts and we come into alignment. Okay, all of those thoughts, instead of being scattered and chaotic, now fit into this super flowy whole circle. Okay, when we come into alignment, win-wins start to show up everywhere. Life just shifts. These shifts happen internally, they happen with relationships, they happen with our financial opportunities, they happen with life opportunities. Like, things just start coming into sync, into synchronization, okay? So all truth, all knowledge, all wisdom, everything that is good connects into a circle, okay? We start recognizing these because things start showing up as win-wins. When we get caught in loops, the reason we get caught in loops is like, well, I want to do what's best for me, but that's not what's best for this person. And so we get stuck in this place. Like, I want to do this, or I like this, but so-and-so doesn't like this. And now we get these, we don't have win-wins. But when we fall into that place of truth, everything starts to come together, and we start to notice that everything starts to look like a win-win. It's been my experience over and over and over again. And I watch it in my clients too. When we live according to truth, we choose into a life of synchronicity. Even the word universe means one verse or one song. This one truth that it embodies, okay? These are the three things that I believe, that I consider universal truths. The first one is the truth of God, however you want to define that. The truth of God's power, love, and attributes. Now you can say the truth of the universe's power, love, and attributes. You can do whatever you want. Okay. That is the first universal truth. The second one is the truth about your potential, your value, your capacity, your rights, who you are. Okay. The third one ties deeply into the first two, almost to the point where it shouldn't exist, but I feel super, super powerfully that it needs to exist. The third one is the truth about how much power other people or our experiences actually have over us. And the hint is the only power that it has is that which we give it, because of the first two. So the process that we all want to go through, whether we call it enlightenment or whether we call it healing or whether we call it expansion or whether we call it whatever, there's so many different ways we can describe that process, right? Rebirth. That process is simply to replace untruth with truth in the unconscious mind. Now, we're all trying to do that consciously. We're all trying to do that out here in the world, and we're all trying to put stuff in, right? We're all reading books and listening to podcasts and going to this and attending this event. We're all trying to put all this new in. So the process that no matter what we call it, we can call it enlightenment, we can call it being reborn, we can call it healing. That process is really the same. Doesn't matter what we call it, right? But when it comes right down to it, here's the radical idea that we simply replace untruth with truth in the unconscious mind, or to define, redefine, or refine our identity. And this becomes this. Because when our inner beliefs match universal truth, we are aligned within ourselves and aligned with the universe. When we have experiences, especially the kind of experiences that we call trauma, okay, my definition of trauma is we had an experience that we weren't neurologically ready to handle. And because we weren't neurologically ready to handle it, we created some kind of a defense mechanism in order to be able to get through it. Okay. And then later, that defense mechanism doesn't serve us. And the defense mechanism is often, most often, some kind of meaning that we've developed. Okay. Super good example. If a child grows up in an orphanage and they're lying there all alone in the middle of the night, surrounded by other babies that are sleeping, some may be awake, and an adult walks by and the child begins to cry, and the adult doesn't pick the child up, that child can create meaning from that experience. Okay. And if the meaning that the child gives that experience, it will most definitely have to do with the child. And that's part of the way the unconscious mind works. To the unconscious mind, everything is personal. It's all about me. So because the child doesn't have the capacity to rationalize and say, well, there's not enough people that work here to be able to pick me up all the time whenever I need to cry. Like, of course, that's the truth. But an 18-month-old child isn't going to recognize that. It's going to be about him. So that child, let's say that child determines, I don't matter. Okay. That's how that child was able to neurologically jump to deal with a situation that he wasn't psychologically or neurologically ready to handle. He didn't have the truth, or the ability to rationalize, to come to the truth that he needed in that moment. So he created what's called a meaning. Okay, he created an untruth. This means this. If I don't get picked up, it means I don't matter. And then what happens is, because of the nature of truth, whatever we plug into our systems, okay, we take a truth, we take a belief and we plug it into ourselves. And it's like plugging it into the matrix. Okay, we get to live then as if that's true. So this child, yes, decides at 18 months that they don't matter. But then over and over and over and over again throughout this child's entire life, they have experiences of not mattering. Now, this is the way the unconscious mind works. This is what the unconscious mind does. We get to decide what's true, and then we get to live as if it is true. And those lessons aren't always very fun until we make the decision to really settle on truth and then live as if what is really true is true. That's when we come into that whole circle, when we adopt those things as being true. So what if I said that we aren't so much here on earth to be tested? Like, are we going to do the right thing? Are we going to be good people? But we're here as scientists testing out different beliefs. And when we choose one, we plug it into ourselves. And in plugging it into ourselves, we're also plugging it into the matrix of everything that we see and experience. And then we get to experience life as if that belief was true. And this is really the way the conscious and unconscious mind work together. Okay. And this is why we have patterns. This is why we have the same experiences over and over and over again. This is why we can't get away from ourselves, because wherever we go, we take ourselves with ourselves. Okay. But the good news is we can always change our minds. And that means that we're creators. That means that we have power. That means that we have the potential. That's like something from a sci-fi movie, right? Like, this is super cool. Life is amazing. Because it really is amazing that you can change like that. And not only change your belief, but everything that's tied into that. Because once that child from that orphanage went through the process of changing the unconscious mind and then decided, I do matter, then the thoughts from that belief started to change, and that person started having different thoughts, and the behavior started to shift as well. Well, pretty soon, things on the outside world, people are starting to treat this person as if that person matters. Because that's the way the matrix works. It's all a series of mirrors. Whatever we are on the inside is what we see on the outside. Right? Because whether we think we can or we think we can't, we're right. Whether we think we are or we aren't, we're right. Yeah. Okay, moving on. Hypnosis might not be what you think it is. I experience this all the time. I talk about unconscious programming and people be like, yeah, that's good. That's what I want. That is some good stuff. And then I say the process of unconscious programming, unconscious reprogramming is hypnosis. And they're like, no, I don't believe in that. So let's talk about it. To understand hypnosis, we must first define consciousness. Okay. These are two separate things. So we're going to have to understand one side, and then we're going to have to understand the other side. And then we'll be able to see how those two things come together to form this really cool thing that happens inside of you every single day and has forever. Okay. Consciousness. Let's see. Do I have this on a slide? Nope. Okay. Consciousness is the ability to be able to focus 100% completely on something outside of yourself in the world. Okay. So my hypnosis instructor would hold out his hand like this, and he would say, I want you to look at my hand. And I'm going to ask you to do the same thing. I want you to look at my hand, and I want you to focus so intently on my hand. So absolutely intently on my hand. Pick one spot, focus on my whole hand, however you want to do it. There's no right or wrong way. But I want your focus to be so intensely on my hand that everything else doesn't exist. You don't exist. You don't have a name. You don't have a phone number. Oh, this reminds me so much of my instructor. You don't have a phone number. You don't even exist. The only thing that exists is the hand. Now, when you've gotten there, that is consciousness. And it took some work to get there, didn't it? Yes, it did. And so if it takes work to get to consciousness, what is the opposite of consciousness? What is our default? Because anything that is not fully consciousness, okay, whenever we are not fully conscious, by definition, we are unconscious. And that means we're in trance, AKA hypnosis. So yes, I can have moments of consciousness. And the goal is to live as fully conscious as we possibly can in the moment, right? Anytime a person is not fully conscious living in the present moment, they're technically in hypnosis. And I believe it's true that some people have never fully been conscious ever in their lives. They've never woken up. They live in trance or hypnosis all day, every day. And I'm going to describe a little bit about what that means. Okay. To be in trance, people think it's going to feel weird. Hypnosis feels different. No, there's nothing in the nature of hypnosis that's going to feel weird to you because you're doing it all day, every day, and you don't even know it. It's that natural and that normal. Okay. When you see someone who's never really fully been conscious, they live in their imaginations. Okay, a lot. So this thing happened to me and it means this. And then I have to do this because then I have to do, there's so many shoulds. And we're living off of the suggestions that the entire world has given us, whether it be through our religious upbringing or the way we're parented, whether it be the way we were educated, our cultures. All of those things are hypnotic suggestions that have been coming into us all day, every day. And if we're living in those, trying to appease those, trying to follow those, then we haven't really thought. We haven't really come awake. We haven't really decided who we are so that we know if those pieces are a part of us. Maybe they are, maybe they're not. But if we haven't made that decision consciously, then we're making it because we've been unconsciously programmed to do so. Okay. So the way I really like to describe how this works is to explain it through metaphor. So if I were to say that reading, okay, was hypnosis. Okay, I'm going to do a metaphor. So if reading is compared to hypnosis, this is what it looks like. I can be driving down the road, fully conscious, and I can look over and there's a sign and I instantaneously read the sign. That was me popping into trance and popping back out again, popping into reading, popping back out again. Are you seeing the metaphor? Okay. And then an hour later, I'm in my kitchen and I'm reading through a recipe. I'm popping in and popping out of that reading process, popping in and out of trance. And you know what? It feels so natural. I don't even say, oh, I'm reading. I'm just alive. Make sense? Okay. And then an hour later, I want to intentionally read. So I decide to, grab a pillow and a blanket and curl up on my bed and get absorbed in a book. And I'm so absorbed in reading that I forget that I exist, and I'm so into the story. Like, you've all been there. You've all been so far into a story. Okay. Now that's exactly what hypnosis feels like. And that's exactly the nature of hypnosis. Like, we pop in and out all day, every day. Every time you look at words and read them, you're popping in and out of reading, popping in and out of trance, popping in and out of hypnosis, right? But then there's the intentional one where we're like, I'm going to go do this thing, and I'm going to go absorb a book, and I'm going to enjoy it, and I'm going to feel relaxed and, fulfilled when it's all over. Perfect metaphor for how hypnosis works. Okay. Those are the examples of what trance feels like. Trance or hypnosis really is this. We are conscious, okay? Conscious is all my senses coming in to me, right? So I have conscious awareness of what I hear, conscious awareness of what I see, conscious awareness of what I'm touching. True? Okay. So when all of those things are focused inward instead of being focused outside, that's what trance is. That's what hypnosis is. So anytime you are focused on the inside of yourself instead of being focused on the outside of yourself, you are in trance. That includes being in your imagination. When you're watching a movie, you're in your imagination. Because things don't happen for real like they happen on TV, but you're not sitting there critically going, well, that doesn't make any sense. Why is that happening? That shouldn't be like that. Right? That's not true. You're in trance. So trance feels like internally focused instead of outwardly focused. Okay. Trance is actually an unconscious learning state. If I were to get a book and I were to start reading my book, but I'm not paying any attention at all, like literally I'm glossing over the words. You guys have all been here before. Everyone's done this, I think. And at the end of the page, I think to myself, I have no idea what I just read. Okay. That's not a learning state. It's an unlearning state. I wasn't learning anything. But when I'm focused on the words and my consciousness is there with the words, then I'm learning. Albeit I'm learning on a conscious level, because that's a conscious learning state. Because my focus is outward. When I focus on myself on the inside, that puts me in an unconscious learning state, which is really a superpower. It's a superpower that the world hasn't really fully recognized for what it is. And when we do, it's going to be amazing. Because the conscious mind is capable of being aware of 126 bits of information per second. Okay, 126 things we can be aware of. And yet, the unconscious mind is aware of so much more. We're just not aware of it consciously. Okay, the difference between what the conscious mind can learn is 126 bits per second, and it can only learn one thing at a time. But the unconscious mind is capable of 11 million, some people say 40, I don't know which it is, it's a lot, 11 to 40 million bits of information in 1 second. That's an intense capacity for us to be able to learn. And the unconscious mind can learn more than one thing at a time. So that internal focus is a superpower. I don't know about you, but I think hypnosis is probably the coolest thing ever. We just don't know it yet, like we should, like we could, right? Our capacity to learn. Hypnosis is an unconscious learning state. That means we get to train the unconscious mind in hypnosis. That's why people, when they say, oh, I don't believe in that hypnosis stuff, that's why my heart just falls. And I think, oh my goodness, but you do it every day. You just don't call it that. All right. There are stages to learning. The first one, we're going to use an example on this one. I'm going to use the example of when you learned to drive, or you can remember when maybe you taught one of your kids to drive. My kids drive around in the car with me all the time, my littles, right? They drive around with me all the time. They have no idea how incompetent they would be at driving. They're totally unconscious of their incompetence, right? So as one of my children grows older, they decide to sit in the seat and hold on to the steering wheel, and I'm going to take them out for a practice drive. Well, then they become conscious of their incompetence. Then they start going, whoa, there's so much here I don't even know. Because a 7-year-old isn't thinking about what mom's doing down there, the gas and the brake, right? And then the 16-year-old decides to put one foot on the brake and one foot on the gas, and the adult has to go, oh, no, that's not the way it works. Oh, it isn't? Why? I don't even know. Like, I'm now becoming aware of all these things that I'm incompetent in. Then comes conscious competence. That's, I have to logically take myself through every process of driving. Oh, I have to check my mirrors. Oh, I need to put on my seatbelt. Oh, I need to turn the car on, put it in reverse, right? All the steps. Okay. Then as we practice and practice and practice and do it over and over and over again, we come to unconscious competence. Now, this is default setting. This is having learned it deeply so that it's become our nature. All learning must become unconscious to become our default setting or our nature. This is why we think we know who we are. Oh, I'm a really nice person. And then something happens, boom, default setting, anger. I've been there. I get that. I lived that life. Because that was my default setting. There was something there in my unconscious mind that got triggered, right? But that shifts and changes when we learn it differently unconsciously. And then what we want to learn becomes our default setting and becomes our nature when we reprogram it. We live in a world where people, like, they update their curtains, they update their cars, they update their cell phones, they update their homes, they update their carpet, their furniture. Like, we update everything, but we're all running around with programming from when we were 3 and before, and when we were 7. And we're expecting to live adult lives with programming that doesn't serve us. Okay, all of this learning is done by a process called hypnotic rhythm. Okay, all learning is hypnosis. It has to become unconscious for us to be able to learn it and become part of our nature. Hypnotic rhythm is how behavior becomes a permanent behavior pattern. So there are a couple of parts and pieces that contribute to hypnotic rhythm. The first one is repetition. If we repeat, think of a child learning how to walk. Repeat till we got it. Then we move on to the next thing. Okay. Another one is emotion. It's easier to learn when we're excited about something. And if we're not excited about it, it's harder to learn. Okay. Or we can look at that in a negative way. Okay. Let's say you're driving down the road and wham, you're in a car accident. Major emotions show up, right? Well, you're going to drive home and you're going to feel very, very different. Your behavior is going to be totally different on your way home. It's going to, that emotion is going to shift. You're going to be super watchful. You're going to be super careful. You're going to be super aware, because that emotion makes a big impact on our unconscious mind. Okay. So repetition, emotion, and trance, the level of trance we were in, how much our unconscious mind is in the learning state. How much we are in the learning state with our unconscious mind is the other thing that affects hypnotic rhythm. So if we're in trance, we have superpowers to learn things faster. If we're in positive emotions, we have superpowers to learn things faster. If we're super good at repetition, we have superpowers to learn things faster. If we slack on those things, it's going to be harder. It's going to be a lot harder. Okay, all of life is hypnosis. Every moment of your life, you are being offered suggestions. Everything around you is teaching you what is. You're learning it everywhere. Based on the 3 mechanisms we just talked about, you have chosen beliefs about yourself, about who you are, about the world, about the nature of the life that you're living. And you have come to beliefs about those things, and they have become who you are. This is hypnosis. All of life is hypnosis. Okay. Humans are meaning-making machines. From 0 to 7 years old, we all lived in a state of unconsciousness. Children are completely and totally hypnotized. Children do not have a conscious, rational mind. Ask any child why they did something, and they'll look at you and they'll say, I don't know. Or they'll look at just basic common sense and say, oh, because he did that, like cause and effect, right? Because he did it first. There was no rational decision making in that. It was an immediate unconscious response, right? Okay, so from 0 to 7 years old, we all lived in a state of unconsciousness. We were sponges. We absorbed everything around us, whatever was going on, everything. Okay, we didn't have a choice whether to choose that or not. What we were told, we believed, because we were completely and totally open to suggestion. Okay. We were just little sponges that absorbed everything. And that's why we all have to go to therapy and get over our childhood issues. Well, we don't have to, because I think there are better ways. So our unconscious mind absorbed everything, and that became our default programming. Like I said, we're all running around as adults with 7-year-old programming, 6-year-old programming, 5-year-old programming, and it wasn't always the best programming. Yeah, maybe it served you. And I hope that everyone had some kind of positive, helpful programming based in truth. But because we were incapable of rationalizing or making sense, we made meaning. And it was mostly about what our experiences meant about us. We don't have to heal from that. It was a choice we made. Granted, we did the best we could with what we had, right? And it helped us in that moment. It helped us to stay safe or to stay sane or to keep going. Because there are moments when we experience something that takes more neurologically than we already are capable of in this moment. Our potential is, yeah, we can get there. But the universe puts us in those positions to launch us forward, not to hold us back. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. So our thoughts and our behaviors, they all stem from this old programming. So is your unconscious mind a suitcase full of everything you need for the most fabulous vacation ever? Or is it a suitcase full of bowling balls that you're dragging around endlessly and exhausted because of? All of healing and growth can be simplified when we come to understand that it isn't what happened to us that we have to heal from, it's the meaning that we gave it. Again, whatever meaning we assign, whatever truth, right, we apply, it gets plugged into the matrix and we get to live as if that's true. However, we have this amazing capacity inside of ourselves to do something called transmutation. Okay. A tree does this. A tree can take soil and water and sunshine and air, and it can transmute those things into peaches. Okay, that's on a physical level. We do that physically as well. The physical fuel we eat turns into physical energy, but also there's that emotional, mental, energetic capacity to be able to transmute things. Transmutation is the power to turn all things to blessing, to turn all untruth to truth. Anything that's negative drives us to the positive. All things are for our good. Okay. So when we get to the root of where our negative emotions are and we transmute them, because energy can't be created or destroyed, it can only be changed, right? That's transmutation. The power or the energy that's fueling all of these negative, maladaptive energies that like, I don't have any energy, I'm exhausted, life is hard, all of that energy going into creating life is hard. Now, once we transmute it, it becomes transmuted into power. The power that we need to create and live our lifelong dreams and reach our potential. There's nothing that you need outside of you. Those energies are just misdirected. They're creating what you don't want because you've asked them to. By absorbing some kind of truth that wasn't really truth. Some kind of belief that wasn't truth. Okay. Yeah. Dissolving anger. When we dissolve anger, it becomes emotional control and motivation. When we eliminate guilt, it creates expansion in all areas of our life. When we transmute fear, it becomes power. When we pull energy out of procrastination, when we stop doing the process of procrastination, by transmuting the energy from procrastination, we find that energy going into internal motivation, which allows us to tap into endless inspiration. It quickly changes our potential for creation and living an abundant life. We can trade negative habits for the habits you actually want. You will forget the person that struggled with self-doubt ever existed. You will experience focus, momentum, direction, and become more than you ever have been. Internal alignment means high levels of integrity, therefore healthy boundaries. Boundaries you don't even have to force because they become your nature. Okay. And you'll get to watch as outer chaos settles into order and calm, and problems easily and effortlessly just drop away. Turning to this tree for the pattern of how this works, okay? What we see when we look at a tree is the trunk, the branches, the leaves, and the fruit. That's the conscious part of the tree, right? That's the part we see. The part that we don't see are the roots. Now, if you look at me, what you see of me isn't my unconscious parts. You see my conscious parts. Okay. But the fruit that I bear in life over time, the effect that I have on the world is all determined by my roots, by my unconscious roots. Okay. So the cause of what my life looks like on the outside is embedded in my unconscious mind, just like the cause of the quality and the quantity of fruit that a tree produces is determined by the roots. Okay. This is another one of those fabulous patterns that exists in life. We see the up and the down, right? You can see that already. And you can see the process of moving forward here. But there's something embedded in this that a lot of people don't understand. And because they don't understand it, they don't get to launch into the life that they want, especially after they've experienced something hard or some kind of a traumatic experience. So we all start over here on A, right? Right here. We're just moving along, trucking along, and then something happens in B. Okay. We have some kind of major life event. And if it's a traumatic one, or here's the thing. Okay. So trauma, we always see as something negative. And everyone's experienced some kind of hardship that they've overcome and been able to look back and said, I'm glad that happened. That was a blessing in my life. But sometimes good things happen to us and we can't neurologically deal with them. Just the same way we deal with it, the same way we would a trauma. Okay. Someone steps into your life that loves you unconditionally, and you don't know how to receive that. That will set you into this kind of response where you're down, like you drop down into the space. Okay. It's the contraction. It's the pressure of the contraction, right? We perceive ourselves as being down. Okay. This could look like depression. It could look like losing someone that we love. It could look like so many different things. So many different things, right? And it's different for every person. It really is. So we get to the space where we're at B. And then we fall down to C. Now, what we want is we want there to be another piece right here. We want D to be right here back where C was. And that's what we're looking for. We want to get back to where we were before this thing happened. And granted, most of us don't want to go backwards. We want to go forward, but we want it to be right here. It's this line right here that scares the bejesus out of us. This is what we fear more than being down here. And if you ever talk to someone, you know, that understands psychology at all in your life, you've heard the phrase secondary gain. We would rather be down here than we would facing this new level of growth. Okay. We can't go back to where we were because we have to have some kind of a neurological shift to be able to get to the next level. If we got back to where we were, we would literally stay on that plane forever and ever and ever because we fear some things that are new. That's a normal part of the existence of being a human being. It's built into us. And there are reasons for it, really powerful ones, because without that bit of opposition, we would stay, literally, just stay where we are. It would be too easy to grow. It would be too easy. And we wouldn't put any effort into it. Okay. So once we're down here in C, we can get stuck there. We can create all kinds of stories about why we're there and why it's somebody else's fault. And as long as someone else does something to get me out of here, then I'll be able to move on. Or, you know, whatever the story is, because there are as many stories here as there are here. There's one for every human on this planet and one for everyone who's ever lived on this planet. So the trick is to recognize and understand that to get from here to here, we have to level up. And that includes making psychological and neurological shifts, meaning growth. We can't go back to where we were. That doesn't exist. And if we try, we're going to hit this and fall back, hit this and fall back, hit this and fall back. There's nothing to stand on here. There's nothing. So when we're open to truth and we're open to accountability, saying, I chose this. I played my part in this. This was part of my patterns. Right? And recognizing that even if we didn't choose it, it's in our programming, which puts us in a perspective of accountability, which has nothing to do with shame, it has nothing to do with blame, it has nothing to do with fault. Accountability says, I take account of what this looks like. I have the ability to take account of what it looks like. Responsibility says, I have the ability to respond to it. And we trust, because it takes trust to get past this scary part, right? Because up until then, yeah, we've got it. We already know this part. We've been there. But from here up, this is what's frightening. But let's be honest, this is what we all want. We come into our true power as we embody truth on both conscious and unconscious levels. So the question that I think is the most important question to answer is how? As human beings, we exist on 4 planes. Okay. The first one is the physical plane. I don't think that needs to be explained or described. The next one is the emotional plane. The next one is the mental plane. And the last one is spiritual. Okay. These are the 4 planes on which we exist. The way we experience the physical plane is with the physical body. The way we experience the emotional plane is our unconscious mind. The way we experience the mental plane is our conscious mind. And the way we experience spiritual is our higher conscious mind. So what I'm teaching here is the process of coming into this wholeness, coming into this synchronicity, and aligning to be able to become a unified person at one. Okay. So I taught you before that in order to go into hypnosis or trance, the conscious mind goes into and reads or pays attention to the unconscious mind. Okay. And these are the things the unconscious mind holds. Okay. Memories, emotions, our limiting beliefs, the things we've experienced that define who we are, how we see life, the structure for who we are. Okay. Now, when we go with our conscious mind into our unconscious mind, that means we're going into hypnosis. Then we have the process to unlearn some of this. Okay. So right here, the mental is going into the emotional. We get to unlearn some of these things. And as we do, things start to shift. Oh, those physical symptoms that I was feeling before, like I don't have headaches anymore. Or the mental, I was talking to my daughter today. We did a little bit of a technique. We did a couple of minutes of a technique with her, and she says, school's easy now. Like she's functioning better on a mental level. And funny, the thing we worked on had nothing to do with school. Okay. Because these 3 things are so intertwined that when we switch or shift things on one level, they start shifting on all levels because they're all tied in here. Okay. So when we start clearing things from the unconscious mind, these three pieces start coming into alignment. And when these three things come into alignment, then our unconscious mind here, first we went from mental into emotional, right? From conscious into unconscious. Then we have the capacity for the emotional to be able to tie into the spiritual, or the unconscious to tie into the higher conscious mind, which means we now have the capacity to receive enlightenment, to receive inspiration. And that enlightenment and that inspiration teaches us how to tie all these pieces together and become whole and become one. So if you look at it this way, there are no answers outside of you. Your conscious mind goes into your unconscious mind and learns what changes and teaches what learns and teaches at the same time, learns what's there and teaches what it wants to be there, right? Which brings these three planes into alignment, which gives us access to this, which teaches us all the things that we need in order to be able to become whole. So forget about the programs, forget about the books, forget about the podcasts. Stop trying to learn everything consciously. Your conscious mind only has the capacity to learn. It's such a, it's analog. We have the capacity for digital here. Let's move up a phase. Like, who's listening to 8 tracks anymore? I've got Spotify. Like, that is powerful. Anyone who recorded tapes when they were young gets Spotify and how cool it is. That's what we have the capacity for. Everything available at our fingertips. Every song we can think of, like right there, anytime we want it. How cool is that? So we're living in this analog way when we have the capacity to be able to live digitally. Everything we need is already inside of us. Our conscious mind goes into our unconscious mind. Our unconscious mind has access to our higher conscious mind. That makes you kind of a superhero. Okay, not kind of. That makes you a superhero. That means you have endless potential. And literally the only thing standing in your way are these little untruths that you learned at one time that are so easily changed. It's laughable how easy it is to change those. We've been hypnotized to believe that healing is hard, that healing takes work, that healing takes time, that healing is messy, and it's not. It's easy and effortless. And what happens after healing, that's where the beauty begins, because that's when we get to tie into this. And this teaches us everything we need after that. Almost every day, I take about 20 minutes and I lay down or sit in a super comfortable position and I let my body relax and I go into what is called hypnosis with really no intention except the fact that right before I go in, I say, please bring to my conscious mind, to my conscious awareness, whatever download I need for the day, like whatever it is that I need for this next step. What do I need to know? I've built my entire business this way. Okay, what's the next step? Okay, what's the next step? Do I get help from other people? Sure. But I know when to hire them. I know when I need them. I know what people I need. And sometimes just I need to be with that person. And sometimes they have something specific to teach me. But my higher conscious mind has a blueprint for my life and a blueprint for my body and a blueprint for who I am, my identity. And when this is in alignment, then we have access to it. And that's a beautiful thing. But when we have that chaotic thinking thing that we talked about in the beginning. It's so confusing because, yeah, we might get little bits of inspiration that somehow make it through all of the muck and the lies. I hate to say lies, untruths. But then we just doubt them. We add them into our loops and we get confused, and then we don't know how to tell the difference between the one and the other. Clearing this out is the most powerful step you can take. And it's not hard. It doesn't take a long time. Because until we make the unconscious conscious, it will direct our lives, and we will call it fate. The work that I do is timeline therapy, hypnosis, and neurolinguistic programming. These are the tools that I use to reprogram your unconscious mind. We have the inherent power to transmute energies. We talked about that. We have the power to change our perspectives and to change our minds because we have the capacity to go into trance, and we have the capacity to learn both consciously and unconsciously. We have the power to imagine things different than they are right now. And because of that, because of our imagination, which is an unconscious function, we can picture ourselves in a different place. We can picture ourselves up on that higher plane, like we were talking about, because imagination is everything. Imagination is a preview of life's coming attractions. We are what we imagine ourselves to be today. And if we can imagine ourselves to be different, then we can be that tomorrow. Because we were and are and always were meant to be creators. So this is my invitation for you to align your unconscious mind and master your life. Again, I'm Amy Brooke. My website is www.blessingsamybrooke.com. Join my Facebook group called Align Your Unconscious Mind. Friend me on Facebook. Let's connect.